a weekly kill rate of sort of 42, 46,000 a week in that range. It's only 2 years ago we were processing, 75 to 80,000 cattle a week. So yeah, production or processing numbers are well down, but the containers shortage has stopped. And without taking too much time, who would ever think the old humble Shep pallet, the Luscombe pallet, we were selling to manufacturers here in Australia, and they'd ring up, do you know where I can get a pallet? Of course, they'd take product in, they'd process it, and they couldn't send it out. And even some sort of large grinders, could you help us get some pallets? And that even affected the logistics within Australia. So COVID brought on a whole set of circumstances we'd never ever experienced before, but I think we're slowly returning to normal. And we should congratulate the Australian government on the vaccination rates. I think we're about 85 or 85.4%. So COVID's past us, but we need to remain vigilant. I wish all countries in the world were as lucky as we are, as well managed as we are.
Well, COVID, they say, is going to become the new flu, which means that we're all going to get it at some stage or other, but in different forms. Brett, do you have any container issues at your end?
Well, yeah, I would echo that sentiment. It got pretty tough for a while. It is getting better. We've seen some of those freight rates coming into America falling quickly. Some rates are reported down as much as 45%. Now, the thing to remember, we hear a lot about freight rates, and it's usually dry boxes or just containers. Refrigerated containers can get tight, and a couple things to think about. In 2020, China imported 4 million tons of pork. That took a huge amount of containers. The Chinese hog market turned over, it collapsed, and for 12 months, Chinese hog farmers lost money, ending in about June this year. Chinese hog prices are now up 115% since March. The China hog market is getting ready to turn to imports again. And I think there's a chance, if we see that, that takes a big pull on the global refrigerated containers. The same problem could exist next year when we see this big drop in US beef production. We're expecting a 7% production decline next year. We have a very strong US dollar. Australia's got a bigger herd. We could see the potential for a lot of Australian beef. This refrigerated container base is a finite asset, and it just depends on what goes on with China, with pork, with what's needed. We can see those issues come back again if we have a big pull globally on refrigerated containers.
Maybe we should start producing pigs, fellas. What do you think? There's a market there. Any issues with containers for you blokes?
Not so much for us, Jerry, but I'm very keen to know from Terry, just on labour issues, and Terry just talked about the difference in kill numbers in this country at the moment. And we know all of our businesses are facing labour shortages, but particularly for our processing sector, that if we are to see this wave of cattle coming on board, is the capacity there within our processing sector to meet the needs?
I was very long last time. The simple answer is no. We can't process all. If we had a surge in cattle in the next 3 to 6 months, I don't think processors can handle that volume. We have the palm scheme has been a wonderful thing, and I think there's about 6,000 people under the palm scheme that work at meatworks across Australia. If we took those people out, we'd be even at lower processing capacity rates. So yeah, labour is a huge issue, and there's not one single solution, but I won't hog the floor on that.
But I guess to follow up, what more do you think needs to be done from a government policy position?
I think it has to start at the enterprise. For some unknown reason, we've stopped teaching economics at school. We've dropped some of the manual arts subjects at school, and we think there's a group of students emerging from the high school system in Australia that have been taught to work smarter, not harder. So people don't want to do the difficult physical work. We actually think that learning to work hard is a skill. When we were in an area that was a large dairying area, and people would have to get up and help mum and dad milk the cows for the morning. So they learnt to work at an early age. And it's a bit of a different concept now. We've engaged with local high schools over the last probably 10 years. I started with just 5 students after school doing 4 hours a day, twice a week. We now have over 60 students in a small business, and it beats pushing a supermarket trolley, it beats flipping burgers at McDonald's, and a lot of those young people that learn how to work, get a taste for the trade, they said, this is better than I thought it was, and all of a sudden working in the meatworks has become cool for a few school leavers. It's not such a bad job, this is more technical than I think. So they then stay with us, a percentage stay with us when they complete senior schooling. Some people have a gap year and defer for a year, put a bit of money in their pocket. That's just one solution we've had, and that's working quite well. Obviously, the big one that everyone talks about is immigration. Yes, we need to bring people in. The PALM scheme is addressing that. Last government did the ag visa. That's been sort of just curtailed a bit while the department gets their head around that. Hopefully the ag visa gets rolled into PALM. I think the bilaterals are already in place with Vietnam, but there needs to be changes to tax law and things, so that hasn't quite worked out.
But we're not the only country looking for labour. Every other country in the world is also seeking labour. I don't know where it's going to come from. Do you have a view on this, Christian?
It's a huge,
labour?
Yeah, huge challenge for globally, really. Everywhere you look, every industry you look is actually challenged, and certainly my discussions with members, every feedlot out there is obviously really challenged at the moment. One of the things that we're really focused on is promoting careers in the feedlot industry. We've recently launched Feedlot Tech, which really talks to the great careers that are available in the feedlot industry, and we've been pushing that out. But then also, obviously, once we've recruited individuals, capability building is critical, I think. And obviously the training courses that are available, we really want to encourage people to do those, to build that capability, build that expertise within the feedlot industry.
Jerry, if I may, I'd like to congratulate Christian. He talks about encouraging people. We don't have a labour shortage, we have a people shortage. Everyone talks about labour as a commodity, and I think it dehumanises the situation.
Make the distinction for me. Clarify the distinction.
We want labour, we want someone to do something. We want, I hate to say this, but the slave trade was labour. We want to entice young people. We want to talk about careers and people. I think we've got a people shortage, and I like to keep trying to change that tone or the tenor of that debate all the time, because it's a people shortage we're experiencing, and if we excite the young people, if we offer good careers, career pathways, it'll go a long way to changing the tone of that. Whenever we talk about labour, I just feel as though we're commoditising it. So that's a personal view, not an industry view.
Interesting. What's your view from the USA on the question of labour versus people?
Yeah, it's interesting how we had this problem develop universally around the world all at the same time. That's unique, right? And the real factor, the real driver of this, in my opinion, was COVID. COVID stimulus thus far worldwide is over $18 trillion. $18 trillion in stimulus. The G20 countries have paid out 10 times the amount of stimulus they did in the 2008 financial meltdown. And so it's just created this overcharged demand for everything. And it happens so quickly that we just can't catch up. Now, in the US, and I'm sure it's the same there, it's not just agriculture, it's construction, it's everything. But what's unique, if you look at the history of America, we've always been able to find a cheaper labor base. 100 years ago, we had Irish immigrants coming in, working in the factories. For years, we've had Mexican immigrants come in. And we're in a spot right now, and I don't know why, but neither political party is willing to truly allow immigration. Immigration and lower labor costs has made America competitive at manufacturing for 100+ years. And I feel like we've just lost that. We have a massive pool of workers. If we go south, not just Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador. We've got all those countries. There are thousands and thousands, if not millions, of workers down there that would love to come into the U.S. and work in a meat works for $25 US per hour. It would be a dream come true. But yet we just politically have not been able to cross that bridge.
So this is politics as far as you're concerned?
What's that?
This is politics.
It's politics. It's overcharging the economy, and then it's a resistance to allow immigrants. And it is a people problem. We have plenty of people outside of our borders that would love to come and work. We aren't letting them in. What it's really doing, it's spurring massive innovation into technology. Companies are trying to do everything they can do to work away from human labor. And thus far, that's not a cost decrease. That's raising the cost of manufacturing in the US thus far.
Bryce, you're an employer. Are you having problems employing people?
Oh, look, Jerry, it's, I think all of our businesses are facing that issue, but I think Terry raises a really good point. Reputation and the team you build, it's a competitive market, right? Yeah. So it's the environment that you create in your employment, I think, and workplace is so crucial, and I think we're all looking at that across our businesses, and I think we learnt from some of the speakers yesterday, bringing those adaptions on how we, mould our workplace. We're advertising for an office role at the moment, and making that a flexible working environment, whether it's from home or the hours of work, I think is absolutely crucial to ensuring that we do find those people and slot them into the spots that's going to suit them and our business.
Looking broadly at the lot feeding industry, is there a labour shortage?
Oh, absolutely. I think, everyone in this room would attest that we're facing issues in attracting, enough people to the sector, and particularly, in areas like livestock management and pen riders, finding skilled, people to join our teams is a real challenge. ALFA has had a proud history of investing back in our people, but it's also about putting that message out there to actually make these careers and the industry and our profile as a sector much more bold and loud than it has been in the past, to ensure that young school leavers, people in later life are considering the feedlot industry as a viable career choice.
Brett, would you have any advice for the industry about how to recruit sufficient numbers for the industry? Well,
the economist in me says this: money talks, right? And I think we've seen that. I look at the money, the wages being paid today. It's a different equation for kids that are in secondary school, getting ready to graduate, trying to make a decision about college. For a lot of years, college was the preferred route. But I look in the US, I see young people going in to become electricians, to become plumbers, that are going to go out without all the student loan debt and are still going to make a lot of money. And so I think markets are really good at allocating scarce resources. And we've definitely seen a big increase in the wages being paid across our ag sector, even in the cattle feeding sector. And it's just going to take more of that. Those kids that have that love in their heart for animals or for agriculture have not always had a good career option. And I think that is changing. The trick is finding those and helping those young people get pointed in the right direction.
Christian, we chatted a couple of days ago, and we talked about the different programs that are now available to the lot feeding sector to improve the lot of, or the prospects, I should say, of people in the industry. Are they starting to show fruit yet, or do you still have a lot of work to do?
Look, I think, as Bryce said, we've got a strong investment in building capability within the industry. So, and many members here today would have attended many of the workshops that we've been able to offer. Last year we trained up over 1,500 individuals through our particular program. So I think that coupled with feedlot tech, really getting out there and telling people about the various career options within the feedlot industry, it's exciting, and it is an exciting career. There's amazing opportunities within the feedlot industry in terms of career progression, and we heard from young lot feeders last night talk to that in a really positive way. So we just need to get out there, make sure people are aware of it, and try and attract that talent.
Christian, could I ask, would any feedlotters be participating in a school-based traineeship?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
a lot.
think
I
they're
mean, in our business, we've got a couple at the moment and have had for a long time. And much similar to your story is working with your local community and local schools to attract that. But I think Brett raises a good point. Money talks, right? But it's also the value and the size of these businesses that young kids are running, right? Like there must be a room full of 30-year-olds out there that are running businesses that turn over $100 million. And I don't think that we talk about that enough in the sector, and that these are really important careers, and we're promoting young people really rapidly into really high level business progression roles.
So Bryce, we're underselling.
I think agriculture's always undersold itself, right? We're not great at being bolshy and bold and sort of being out there on the front, and that's probably an Australian trait a little bit as well. But it's a competitive market. We need to be out there. We need to be selling that story much harder than we have before.
We need to take a leaf out of the IT industry, or they're
yeah, look, I was wondering
making...
when Terry said meat processing was cool again, I'm wondering what the Nolan's TikTok page looks like, but anyway.
We don't.
Wonderful.
It's coming.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move now to the next topic, which is the crystal ball. Everybody's got a crystal ball of various dimensions. Mine is pretty small, I have to tell you. But China, there's a good news story, and it's about demand and flow-on effect. And Brett, you were talking about it earlier, but that's for the pig industry. What do you see as the future for the beef industry in China?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I've been traipsing around China for 20 plus years now. And for 15, 16, 17 of the last 20 years, when I'm in China, I'm eating hot pot beef, frozen dairy cow, lean, terrible beef. The last 3 to 5 years, demand for high quality beef in China has absolutely exploded. Grain-fed beef has enormous potential. They're actually buying all beef. They're buying every pound of beef they can find in the world right now. Think about this. China's had a terrible year, right? Their economy is on the ropes. They're in and out of COVID lockdown every week. In August, they imported a record 277,000 tons of beef. They're on track to import $18 billion of beef this year, US. The market is incredible. I just looked today, the average retail price of beef in China is up 3% over a year ago. On top of lockdowns, everything going on, beef demand, I am enormously optimistic for China. I just updated my forecast for US beef exports. I predict that in 2023, China, Hong Kong will become the biggest market for US beef, and it will probably stay in that #1 spot the rest of my life. But for US and Australian beef, this grain-fed market is phenomenal. And I would suggest that we're in a different boat than the Brazilian beef. You think about this, the wealthiest 10% of China that's really pursuing this luxury item, this grain-fed beef, the wealthiest 10%, that's 140 million people. That's more than the population of Japan. And I would suggest they might be a little more recession-proof than the lower classes that are eating Brazilian beef, Uruguayan beef, and some of the other low-quality beef coming in. I think the opportunity is fantastic going forward.
Do you guys agree with that?
100%. Yeah. We need to be better with China.
And what are we doing to take advantage of that? Christian?
Well, I think one of the real strengths of the supply chain in Australia is the development of brands.
Brands.
The meat brands and the exporters and brand owners are constantly in market, establishing those relationships. And that obviously flows back onto the supply chain. And like any brand, whatever we consume, we want it consistently 24/7. We want a high quality product, and obviously feedlots are really well placed for that. And so, when you look at market dynamics, I think some really interesting figures. Obviously, cattle on feed, we've stabilised above 1 million head now since 2018, and that's post even obviously drought. So the ability to service the brands, get into market, establish those relationships, working with the processing sector to get into those markets, meet those specifications 24/7, 365 days a year. It's just it's critical.
But our relationship with China has been somewhat fractious in recent years. I mean, the wine industry, for instance, suffered a huge setback when they pulled out, and there will be other times when we are over-dependent on China.
Oh, look, Jerry, I mean, it's really apparent. The relationship with China is not where it was, and I think industry and the nation more generally is apprehensive about keeping that important trade in front of us. And I think industry, collectively across the supply chain, has done a great job of not being alarmist about some of our trade issues with China. And I think that's really crucial, that while we hope from a government to government level that the situation will improve, we know in the marketplace and within the trade, there's many businesses here and in China that have, great and really beneficial relationships. And I think that's crucial. And while China, is not where it was for us in terms of beef exports, 3-4 years ago. We've still got to remember it's well in our top 5, if not, in our top 4, and that's crucial. It's Australia is absolutely an exporting nation of beef, and we need all those doors open.
And I think the megaphone diplomacy hasn't worked at the highest level. No. We can't sort of come out in the press and say what's wrong with China, hoping to win a vote or two in Australia. We need to build long-term stable relationships, and that's about trust and time and all those sorts of things. So I think that we're starting to make slow recovery in that area, but just be careful at the political level, because it does affect trade and it has huge ramifications.
Well, those of us sitting around here can't really make any headroads into the political situation. We can opine all we like. Brett, your view on China and the future going forward, particularly for beef?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Now, it's all about market access. And I'm still in awe of what the U.S. got done with the Phase 1 deal. Our beef access was phenomenal. But it is a game, and it's a political game. I look at your new administration in Australia. I think there are opportunities maybe to have a little reset with China. Australia doesn't carry the political baggage that we do or the friction that we have with China. But yet I see those plants delisted. I think there's an opportunity moving forward for Australia there. But I think this grain-fed game is phenomenal in China, and I think it will be in the future. And I agree with the comments on branding. I think there's a real opportunity to expand brands into China and to continue to help develop that new market.
Okay, cool. Bryce, I want to ask you something about something new that has cropped up just last week. The first Australian feeder cattle swap. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, well, it wasn't my swap, so it's a market. But look, I think it's a really exciting development. It's not just the fact that swap's got away, but also the market indice that we've seen created, on the Darling Downs around the feeder steer market and market discovery. I think industry has grappled with this space for a long time in working out, true market price discovery. And I think the indice, and congrats to Argus Media as a shout out. I think Joe's here somewhere. It's, 1 minute she was measuring the coal market and copper and knew nothing about the grain-fed beef or feeder steer trade. And within a couple of months, we've got a really accurate weekly indice showing us what the value of a feeder steer is. And I think that talks to value discovery, not just for lot feeders, but right across the supply chain. So that's a grass-fed producer in North Queensland, a processor at Gympie, or an Angus producer in the south. You can draw a correlation off that. So I think that for me, I think that's been a huge development. We all know that we're working in a margin business in the feedlotting sector, controlling inputs and your output prices is how we protect that margin, and having having the ability to forward price through a financial instrument such as these swaps, I think it'll bring a lot of benefit out to our industry, and the access to capital. We all know we're all out there looking for more dollars because Terry isn't paying us enough to buy that next feeder steer into our business, but the access to capital through these types of products I think is really important.
Terry, what do you know about it?
Very little. No, I haven't been involved in that feeder swap price index at all.
Is it a sort of a stock exchange for cattle?
I think it's a great opportunity. I mean, you could say it's a stock exchange, but I think that's probably oversimplifying and complicating it at the same time. But you look at the opportunity to provide maturity in the red meat supply chain that Australia has struggled with over a long period of time. There's been lots of stops and starts, but if you look at the cotton industry or other commodities offshore, you look at the US beef industry, the ability to forward price, sale price out or input price in, depending where you sit, and have some certainty there, offset some risk, take a position, and then focus your energy on margin management and efficiencies within your business. And as Bryce said, access capital and things, the maturity that it will bring over time to our industry, and all of us starting to talk more common languages and starting to talk about the things that really matter is a great start. And there's going to be some ups and downs, there's going to be some highs and lows, and a few people, including us, are sitting there trying to pick the physical. But over time, it needs to get volume. We all need to get behind it because I think it'll be really good for the industry. Christian,
last week Beef Central ran an article, pardon me, on strategic market changes that are happening at the moment. How do you read those changes?
Yeah, I think the article you're referring to was one on, I guess, the changing structure of the grass-fed industry, and particularly moving away over time. We're talking trends in data around moving away from a traditional Japanese ox, basically, model to a shorter turning off, for the feeder market. So coming back to that branded conversation, and the numbers that we're seeing on feed with, consistently above 1 million, we're seeing capacity at record levels now of 1.5 million, which is around, I think, 7% on the 5-year average. Those signals are starting to trickle down, obviously, to the extensive production system, and where you're seeing a change in servicing the feedlot industry, which I think is really positive.
Brett, do you have a view on what Christian's comments were?
I'm just not that familiar with what you've got going on this swap program in Australia.
But I think to that point, I think in Christian's point around the growth of the feedlot industry in this country is something that this room and the industry in general should be very proud of, but the economics actually speak continually that will continue to grow. And every time I'm up in central Queensland, you talk to people and they say, when will we stop building more feedlots? Well, we absolutely won't. The history over the last 60 years of this industry is an upward trajectory. Yeah. The economics speak to the growth of it. This industry has now surpassed over 50% of beef production in this country, and that's really, really important that here's an industry delivering high quality Australian beef every day of the week through our brands and supply chains, and I think not just about the structural issues in industry, but around that demand and the economics of it, we'll see our continued growth.
I do think the markets are continually changing. They're dynamic, they're volatile. If you think back 35 years, our 3 largest markets didn't exist. China, Korea, Japan. US has always been kind to us. As going back in that period, UK existed. And then people got this view of a Jap ox. Oh, that all goes to Japan. Well, the truth is the liver probably ends up in Egypt. The topside probably ends up in Kuwait. Some cuts would go to the US. We've got to move away from this single classification of market and look at sort of a diversification of markets via cuts and via price points. And Brett's comment about the wealthy 10% in China, that's very evident. And they will buy some cuts, but a lung might go to Malaysia. We forget about those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought that someone like Korea was the largest importer of intestines? From a processor point of view, it's about 100% carcass utilisation. For instance, a little plant like ourselves, we fly out pericardium every night to the US, and they use those for human heart valve replacements and things like that. The issue of fetal calf serum, for treating leukemia curing leukemia in children.
Good
There's
Lord.
a whole lot of things that we don't really know about, and as science advances, we'll find more uses for more products from the animal. And it used to be just meat and a hide. Well, hides aren't that great a value at the moment, haven't been for a few years. So,
Quick question on the floods that are besetting eastern Australia at the moment. How is that going to affect the industry? Presumably there'll be a bit of grass around after these floods subside. And what impact will that have on the market and on beef in general?
Oh, look, Jerry, I mean, it's been a great year across the eastern seaboard. You wouldn't find a beef producer out there that's not pretty much smiling about the year they've had and the green grass and fat cattle that we've got around us. But I think, the economics and the market trend has really seen, people doubling down in production, particularly through Queensland in growing herds and joining more heifers. And I think we will see a flow of cattle, coming through the industry, and hence it's important that we help our processing friends and partners sort out those labour issues to ensure that we can process the wave that's coming, because as Brett continues to point out, the growth in the markets are in front of us.
All right. Well, we'll leave the final comment to Brett. Your final comment about how you see the future, basically, in a few words, Brett.
Yeah, great. Well, I sure appreciate being on with you guys. What an honor for me. What a great group. I would just tell you, now we analyze these markets day in, day out. We just put together a report on animal disease issues in Indonesia with 5 key recommendations. I'm happy to share that with anyone that's interested, no charge. But I would just tell you, as I analyze these markets, Australia is the only global beef herd in expansion mode right now. I have forecast that over the next 5 to 10 years, beef supplies are not going to be adequate to keep up with demand globally. We are going to demand is going to outstrip supply. And there's one herd in the world that's growing right now, and that's Australia. And your opportunities are fantastic. I mentioned a strong US dollar, huge decline in US beef production next year. That's going to open doors for you in Korea, in Japan, in the US, around the world. And it all hinges right now on your animal disease status. And so I think this is just a key time for Australia to really double down and say, okay, are we doing everything we can do? Are we doing things the best we can? Because your opportunities the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, I think, are phenomenal.
That's a fantastic, optimistic note on which to end. Please thank Ben and our panel.